think about that scenario, that's a pretty common scenario. If I've got to work with 10 stakeholders and work through all that stuff, and then I've got another set of 10 stakeholders and work through all that stuff, and also work with these teams, it's a lot of work. So going beyond that might be really challenging when you start to lose out on the benefits for the team.
And then, who at the end here, the customer or the product owner is responsible for really identifying, like ranking the risk associated to that particular issue when it comes to regulatory compliance, impact to the customer, the end customer?
Well, ultimately, product owner owns it. Again, it's the product owner owns the product owner owns the store, the invoice of the customer. But we all have a responsibility to participate in that discussion. So the Scrum team has a responsibility, because the product owner may not know those risks per se, but should be equipped to be able to ask the question, how is this affecting us? Or bringing folks in like yourself to come and talk to the team. Here's some things we're challenged with and we need you to consider, right? And I think that's okay as well. But it's a team thing, and everybody has a voice at that table. Ultimately, the ownership is here.
The stakeholders know who their product owner is
Because they should be working with it.
Are they defined any within the business? That's probably
I think it happens organically. Product owners oftentimes will do kind of a stakeholder map, kind of like a mind map type of thing, and say, here's this product touches this group, oh, this group touches this group. So that helps you identify all the stakeholders. Is that perfect? Probably not. So probably room for improvement, but that's the way you might approach identifying it. But it's not like this product you're assigned to these 10 stakeholders, or vice versa.
Just had a question about that. So when you had your example of your product owner that came to your team and said, hey, I have this great idea, let's do this. When in that circle on the earlier slide does that happen? When does the product owner come to the Scrum team and say, hey, I need to work on this item?
In this particular incident, it was a sprint planning, which was way too late, in my opinion. Where that should occur is in backlog refinement, is coming up with ideas, having that discussion. Because if you're having that detailed of a discussion at sprint planning, I'm okay with one off or two off type of thing, but it really should occur in that refinement. But every now and again it happens at sprint planning. That was the case. I mean, we were a really good team. We were doing 2-week sprints, and they've been doing it a while. I would consider them very high conforming. I was okay with one or two to design it or whatever in sprint planning.
I would also add that at the end of the day, Scrum, if something's come up, knowing that it's not urgent, it's not going to disrupt this current sprint, say, hey team, this just came up, we just talked about it for a few minutes. And if it needs to be longer, then set aside some time or bring it into that meeting, but that's an opportunity as well.
Yeah, we did at my last company again. We employed a very similar approach. Because at the end of the daily scrum, we said, hey guys, these two things came in. Let's talk about these real quick. And so we're constantly refining work so that we didn't have to spend 2 hours in a refinement session refining 20 things. We did it 15 minutes here, 30 minutes here, 10 minutes here, et cetera, et cetera. So we did it often as things came up. So we call them story workshops. I don't know why they did, but they were very quick, succinct, move on.
We called them that too, we didn't work together.
That's true.
So,
Scrum Master, the Yoda, the process owner. So if we're doing Scrum and we have Scrum Masters, they own the framework of Scrum. Right? So going back to this self-organizing, Scrum Master is responsible for saying, hey, I think it's awesome that you want to do something different, but we're doing Scrum. So if we're saying we're going to do Scrum, we're going to do Scrum. Okay? So let's, and then they should be able to coach you on those practices. not they'll, they should be educated enough to bring us and to help with that conversation. Why that's either a bad idea or let's hear about what you're thinking and let's go from there, right? They help the team do its best work. They're the team level coach, facilitates communication. I want to clarify something here because I've heard this, not as much anymore, but I have heard this once upon a time that Scrum Masters are facilitators of meetings. There's one activity that they do, but I always say they're facilitators of conversation, right? So they should help with those conversations. They act as a change agent, okay? The development team is responsible for building the thing right. It's made up of whomever's needed, as I talked about, to complete the work. The team is responsible for how to do it. The team is also responsible for committing to the strength, owning the essence of tasks. So again, different from the old paradigm, traditional project management, where, hey, I've got this awesome project plan. I know you weren't there, but here's what we're going to deliver. It's going to take us about 10 months. Where the heck did you get that idea, right? What kind of army do you have employed to deliver this work? In an Agile or in a Scrum framework, the team is responsible for coming up with those estimates and committing to them, building that plan together. As a team, as a group. Not as an individual, but as a group. Okay? They plan their own work, tasks, and dependencies, and they talk through those. If those dependencies across teams are responsible for working with the other teams to understand those dependencies. Self-organizing teams. I told you there's another 4-quadrant model. What this means is teams make decisions collaboratively, cooperatively, voluntarily, and building strength. Bruce Tuckman came up with this team maturation model. You've heard the forming, storming, norming, performing. All teams go through that. You start with forming, everybody gets together. It's conflict avoidance. You go into storming, which is more common conflict. They go into norming, where they start to have some harmony, moving towards it, and then performing, they're in harmony with how they do their work, right? So going back to something, I forget whether it was earlier in this session or another session, it's all running together, I'm sorry. But when you change team dynamics, so let's say you have a team of 7 people and they've been working together for 2 years, and then all of a sudden you bring in somebody new. Dynamics change. And you'll go through some level of this. And maybe you'll go through it quickly because the other team members have worked so well together that they're able to bring the other person up to speed quickly. But you'll go through forming and do a little bit of storming because you've got to figure each other out. They're new to the team. You're not sure how you operate, so there's going to be some clunkiness, right? But we go through that each time, which is why Agile frameworks and methodologies promote keep teams consistent. Leverage that learning, whether it's content learning or whether it's how we work together learning. All of it is good. So keep it together when you can. Make sense?
So, do you measure the Scrum team's maturity on a regular basis? Like, I know that you have a lot of.
Don't, we can. And we have, there's all kinds of tools that we can do to measure that. We have a couple assessments out, but there's some other stuff that we've been reading about that we want to experiment as well. But you can kind of get a sense of where teams are, where they're performing. And it's not, contrary to popular belief, it's not their average velocity or things of that, or predictability.
Is that the barometer thing that John did with a couple of his teams? To figure out where they were in that?
It might be.
That's a part of, that's one of the assessments, the questionnaire assessments.
Just for everybody's knowledge, you sent out a list of, I don't know, it's like 75 questions or something. And you graded it from 1 to 5, you know, how do I feel good or bad about this? And then came up with an average to see where the team felt they were.
Yeah.
I think I missed both sessions, so I don't know how the team felt they were.
Is that a measure of maturity?
That's what I was asking. If
Yeah,
that's-
so I think that one is a measure of maturity, and then there's like 12 principles, so that measures against the Agile principles, right? And then there's also 5 dysfunctions of team that measures against dysfunctions of team.
Maybe that's what.
So there's all kinds of variations out there that help with that maturity model and understanding where a team may be or not be.
So coming back to this real quick, these are, some things that you might see. Performing, it's who we are, what we're doing. Storming is how we work together to try and figure that stuff out. Norming, you're openly discussing our opinions. We're making adaptations based on that. And then performing is where the team going into harmony is truly to that point where they're working to be better as a team. And they're asking that question. Does that make sense? So we're going to hit the Scrum values. We talked about the Agile values. There are 4 values, right? Scrum has its own values, and they're in alignment with the Agile Manifesto. With commitment, committing to yourself, to the team's sprint goal, being focused on the sprint and its goal, openness. These are things that Scrum values is highlighting when you have challenges and problems that are stopping you from success. And it's the point of why we have daily Scrums, and we'll go into that in a second. Respect. These should be values in any team, regardless of whether we're doing Scrum, Kanban, traditional, whatever. These are things that are good to talk about. Courage, being transparent, willing to change, even if it's accepting that you're wrong. Right? So those are the Scrum values. This is a fun little comic. It's the pig and the chicken, pigs and the chicken concept. I'll read it to you because you might not be able to read it. But hey, pig, I was thinking we should open a restaurant. The pig says, I don't know. What would we call it? The chicken says, how about ham and eggs? The pig responds, no thanks, I'd be committed, but you'd only be involved. Right? So you get the metaphor here. The pig has everything in the thing, whereas the chicken is just, he's kind of maybe lay the eggs and just kind of participate in the thing, but not really vested in the same way that the pig is. On teams, when we go into the ceremonies, we'll talk about who, maybe I won't necessarily refer them to as pigs and chickens, but there are people that are truly vested, and then there are participants maybe in some of those sessions. It's okay for them to listen in, but they're not really participating other than listening. Make sense? So going through the activities and ceremonies, we got the sprint. We talked about this on that one picture, sprint planning, daily scrum, backlog refinement, sprint review, and retrospective. So 5 activities or 6 activities. If you look at scrum.org, which all of our coaching is based off of that document, more or less. Scrum.org doesn't talk necessarily about backlog refinement. So the official activities are these 5. But backlog refinement, important or not important? Critical, right? Absolutely critical. Because if we're doing all that work and refining what the thing is that we need to build at sprint planning table, what an excruciating sprint planning. I've been in those. They're horrible. They sometimes bleed into a couple days. Awesome, right? Because we're doing all the design and all the elicitation right there. Bad place to do it. So do it incrementally. If you believe in Agile, regardless of whether you're in Scrum, whether you call it backlog refinement or not, think of everything that we do in increments, right? Try to do it incrementally. Talk about the story workshops. We've got 2 new ones coming in. Let's spend 15 minutes talking about those and what we need to do, as opposed to having a 2-hour meeting to talk about 20 of them, right? So delving into these, release planning, which wasn't mentioned on the activities, but this is also something that we should, not an official event necessarily, but a good activity to do. Going to the concept that, in Agile we don't plan. Well, here's some of the things that we should do, release planning or story mapping. Epic user stories are created and discussed in these activities. The team discusses how many sprints it might take to complete the story. product owner, scrum master, dev team attends, and then the outputs is an organized release plan and or a roadmap for the next release. So let me talk about those specifically. Sprint plan, you guys get that. If I've got a 2-week sprint, I've planned what work I'm going to deliver in those 2 weeks, right? It's pretty detailed. Everybody with me? So what we're talking about here is a level above that, that's release plan. So maybe a release consists of 3 sprints. I don't know, making things up, it could. Or maybe you'll want to talk about the next 3 releases. That might be a release plan. What we did on a team that Aaron and I worked with, we did a quarterly plan that kind of mapped this out. That first sprint that we're about to embark upon, pretty high level of confidence we're going to get that stuff done. And then there's less confidence as I move out on that timeline. Make sense? So I might plan out the next, a rough estimate of what the next release or 2 or 3 might look like, which might consist of 6, 7, 8 sprints, whatever, right? Again, it will adjust, and it's important to adjust that. When you talk with your stakeholders, this is a great tool, release plan is a great tool to talk with stakeholders. Say, hey, here's the things that we talked about were important. You just brought in this new thing. Awesome. Love it. Great idea. More important than this? Or less important? Where does it go? Right? Where should I put this on our release plans? Because something's got to bump out. So again, it's just a tool to help those conversations. Make sense? And then a level above that, even less accurate, is our roadmap. It's kind of a guide. Here's where we want to go. Here's where we think we want to go. These are big things. Okay?
Maybe goals.
We might roadmap it for a year, maybe 6 months, I don't know.
Sorry. I said maybe based on goals. That's
Based
how
on
high
goals.
level it is.
So the epic user story could be the or
Could
maybe
be.
issue that was identified or
It could be. I mean, at a loss for examples, but maybe like
Maybe a login page, right? And user can log in. That might be an epic, and then there's lots of stuff that you break down out of that, right? You need to be able to talk to the database, bring it back. You need your style sheets. You need your buttons. You need. Well, what if I forget my password, right? So
what
that
rules
should
are
be.
applied if I fat finger it, how
So
many
that-
times do I
yeah.
lock it out? Those types of things. So start breaking it down.
Could be like a
into smaller-
feature.
Backlog refinement, we discussed a little bit, but this meeting is to discuss the top backlog items to prepare for the next 2 or 3 sprints. Now, you guys remember Brian Warden? He put out a document a while back that he said, it was titled, and I love it, it was titled, It's Not Just an Event. Or it's, what was it? It's not just a meeting. Backlog refinement is not just a meeting. It's something we do often. Right? The meeting gets us together at the same table to talk about what is prepared. If I were to go into planning tomorrow, this is the stuff that's ready to work. And do we have a collective understanding of what that stuff is? Ideally, we have 2 to 3 sprints ready for the team. Okay? Ready means I know what you're asking for. We've got some acceptance criteria. We've had some discussions around high-level design. I'm pretty sure I know how to approach it if you ask me to test this out tomorrow. That's the level that we're talking about. But there's other activity that may occur. Go, hey, I know you want this. That's cool. No idea. I need to do some research. Is that all right? It's not the highest priority thing, but let me spend some time doing a little bit of research. I'll come back to the next refinement meeting or whatever other meeting I might want to have with the team and say, here's what I've learned. You got a question?
I was just going to ask you what UAC means.
User acceptance criteria. So the UAC, discuss the UAC, that's kind of our acceptance criteria. So yeah, I've asked you to build something. My acceptance criteria kind of gives me the boundaries. How do I know I'm done with the work, right? And so it's not detailed requirements, although they start to bleed into requirements. They should. But they're high level. If I'm a product owner, I said, it's got to do these 4 things. When I type in my username, it's got to meet this criteria, right? That might be acceptance criteria. And then, of course, I've got to apply some of the other rules that organizationally we may have on top of that. And that's where we get into detailed requirements. But product owners saying, look, I just want the thing, I've got to have one cap, I've got to have one numeric, and I've got to have a special character that's got to be 8 characters in length or whatever, right? I don't know, there's something, we see a lot of those. But that's the type of stuff I'm looking for as a product owner. And if you've got other detailed things that need to occur, let's have that conversation. Let me understand. But it gives the team a target, right? They make point or size of story, i.e. estimating. Don't get hung up on what point is, but they size it. One technique is story points, which is a modified Fibonacci sequence. 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 8, 13, modified is goes to 20 versus 20. Some teams might use other techniques like t-shirt size. Product owner, Scrum Master, Dev team intends the output is a group backlog to pull in enough work for the next sprint. That's your goal. That's what you should be looking for.
But just to add to that, if you need someone else, someone who's a SME on something that you're going to be talking about, bring them in to that session as well. Those are the kind of the required players, but bring in whoever you need.
Sprint planning. It's PO's vision for the sprint. So if I'm talking mechanics, the product owner should talk about your team for this sprint. I want to target improved customer usability. I don't know. Right? Very broad. The team starts asking questions. What does that mean? So it helps us focus on this stuff. So it provides us a focus, and then they describe the product owner should have a prioritized backlog. And the team starts working. It determines the work for the upcoming sprint. So again, that whole system. The team's going to say, well, we can do these 10 items. They're taking off the product backlog according to priority, broken down to manageable tasks. So you've got a story, which is just a mechanism to have a conversation. That's the work item you might hear, or PBI, product backlog item. So this is the thing. This is what we're building. The UAC supporting thing, which is this is my target. And then I might task that out. What do I need to do in order to achieve that thing? Make sense? So that's what we're talking about here. They might break it down. They'll break down to management tasks. So I got to build a screen with these fields on it. I've got to make a call to the database and bring back information if I had a match, the username concept. If it errors, I display this. If not, I let them in the system. So those might be separate, disparate tasks that I might articulate. I don't know if it makes sense, but the attendees are product owner, Scrum Master, and the dev team. And your output is a sprint goal, a sprint backlog. Sprint backlog, again, it's a subset of the product backlog. Sprint backlog are the 10 things out of the 500 that we might have on our list to do, the 10 things that we're going to deliver in this given sprint. Okay? That's our target work. Daily Scrum. How many of you do daily Scrums? Or daily stand-ups? Might be another term. Good. So how many of you feel like it's a status meeting? Now, if we're being honest, I think most of us feel that way. I'm challenging you on this. When you go back to your teams, it's not intended to be a status. It's really not. It's intended to be a daily planning event. A calibration with one another that here's what's happening. Hey, here's where I need help. I've been working on this for a day and a half now. I don't know where to go. I need some help, right? So it's a planning event. It's an accountability meeting, right? We don't solve problems there. We just kind of say, here's how it is. Here's where we're at. Here's where I am with these tasks. What about the scenario where, if I'm a developer, I've estimated my task or my work to be a day worth of work, and I report to you, hey, I'm working on this thing. I'll have it done in a day. Next day, I say, still working on it. Day 3, yep, same thing, working on it. If I'm a tester, I'm getting a little antsy. I am. Because again, if you think about it as a planning event, I need that to test so I can get to the next thing. So what can I do to help you get that done? What's missing? Do we need help, right? So holding that person accountable to be honest, be open. Let's help each other. We're a team. We succeed together, we fail together. But let's do this as a team. So let's be honest with one another. Product owner, Scrum Master, Dev team. Others from the outside of the Dev team can attend. That gets into the chicken and pigs concept, where participants and then there are people that are really vested, the team's really vested. There's really no outputs per se, other than you walk out of that with a plan of what to do for the day. Aaron and I do this, we're a large team, two of us. We do this every day. We come in, we check in with each other and say, here's what I'm doing, here's what do you need today from me, okay, what can I count on you for? Awesome. We go off and we do the tomorrow, and that's where she checks me on, you said you would. We go, oh, I got busy with, right? So she's holding me accountable, and all of that's okay. That's how that should work. Sprint review. Let's talk about who attends. Dev team, Scrum Master, product owners, or customers. Maybe you have customers in your sprint reviews. Yeah, you could. Maybe you have your stakeholders. Do you have stakeholders? If not the direct customer, do you have your stakeholders? Okay.
So when does this normally occur, when it's ready to wrap it up?
So at the end of every sprint, yeah. So we begin every sprint with a planning meeting. We planned our work. Daily, we're doing a daily sprint. Somewhere in there, we'll have refinement sessions. And I would argue that it's not necessarily just one meeting, it's lots of little meetings, but teams do employ that in different ways. We're having a retrospective, but this is one of the last activities of the sprint. So here's what we did, ta-da. And then the other piece that I talked about earlier is get that feedback from our customer. Are we on the right track? And if you think about the finances of everything we do, because there's a cost for us doing work, right? What we should ask is, do we have your approval to continue down this same path, right? The answer is no, we're not doing something right. The answer is yes, we're on the right track, or let's make some mods here, or pivot here, etc. Make sense? Retrospective.
Question, but if the PO accepts or rejects each item, but the PO is the voice of the stakeholders, why are the stakeholders there?
To provide the feedback that we're on the right track or not. So let's take the scenario. It's a great question because I've encountered this a number of times with different teams. I have a great written story with awesome acceptance criteria. The dev team says, I know exactly what you want, and here's how we're going to do it. We come to the end of the sprint, deliver exactly what was asked for, and the stakeholder goes, huh, not exactly what we wanted. I see how you got there, but it doesn't feel right. Right? We've heard that. That's okay. Product owner is going to say, well, here's what we've defined with the stakeholder input. We're going to go ahead and accept this story because it meets the intent of the story. But what do you need now, customer or stakeholder, that's different from this? And I'm going to write a new story from that. So it's not the stakeholder necessarily approving those stories. It's giving us the feedback that we're on the right track. And then based on that feedback, we know what we have to do from there. Does that make sense? Does that help? Okay.
Yeah, and just to add to, as a product owner, as a stakeholder, they should be walking into that review, seeing these stories for the first time, right? A product owner should communicate saying, hey, at the beginning of the sprint, this is what the team pulled in based on our conversations, right? So that's where the PO acceptors or rejects, and then you have the feedback.
And that's a bad place to put PO sometimes too, is going, hey, look what we did, and no, it doesn't work the way that we talked about. And then dealing with customers as well on the other end, going, hey, why didn't you give my voice to the team? I told you that's what I wanted, and they delivered something different, right? So kind of gets a little goofy in that regard. So make sure your product is set up for you. So that's the sprint review, and then we get into the retrospective. Here's where we fine tune. Here's where we talk about the good, bad, and the ugly. do it respectfully, right? If things are going poorly, do it respectfully. Talk about the thing, not the people, right? But you want to reflect on past events and behaviors. Talk about the behaviors. We talked about in the conflict session about how we interact with one another. If that's not working, let's bring it up. You know, I think we need to communicate differently. Or if we have this distributed team, you know, I don't know. I think email is not working for us. So can we just pick up the phone and call? That's going to be helpful for me. Because email, every time I'm reading between the lines and it doesn't feel right. We do that often. Email is the worst way to communicate, honestly. Might be a good way to reiterate or restate what you've heard. But it's not a good way to communicate how you feel, right? Product owner, Scrum Master, Dev team are all in attendance for this. Top items to approve was excellent action items. There's next steps or action items. So we talked about good experiments. Come out of retrospective and you said these 10 things aren't working for us. Don't solve all 10. Not yet. Solve one or two. Pick on the most, you know, most hurtful. I don't know the word I'm looking for. The thing that you think will give you as a team the biggest bang for the buck, right? Make that modification. Make an effort. Make a commitment to work on that for the next sprint. Because there's nothing worse than coming to the next retrospective and going, hey, you know, I know we talked about it last time, but we still suck at this. And then go to the next retrospective and go, I know we talked about it the last 2 times, but we still suck at this. What do you think happens? You do that over and over and over. You stop talking about it, and it still sucks, right? You stop talking about it, though. You move on to something else that's probably very superficial. Deal with it. Make a commitment to do it. And then measure. Is it working for us or not? Talk about user stories. I'm going to go through these really quick, so bear with me. When we talk about a user story, it really is nothing more than describing the unit of work that we need to deliver. It has a specific template that we often use, and it's as a, put in the user, right? It's from a user perspective. So that user might be client services rep, or the user might be the borrower, or it might be a borrower with disability. So there's not all borrowers are made equal, right? So as a whatever, I need the thing. This is the what. So that this is the why. This is why it's important, right? You know. So this is the user. I need the what. And this is so that the why. This is the me. This is why we're doing what we do. And if you really take that from a user perspective, when you look at a user story, you say, wow, somebody's using this thing that I'm building or I'm delivering. And the reason they need said thing is for this reason. So now I can kind of understand how they might interact with whatever it is I build. Right? Even if it's a report. So you can think of it that way. That's why they come up with that paradigm.
So is this change gear? Is it
Typically, in our environment, it's TFS. We're using that. So we use the term PBI, product backlog item. So they're work items within TFS. So they're captured there.
Could be driven by change here.
Yeah, it can start there. Yeah, good point. So we mentioned TFS, right? Teams are typically using TFS here. There's other tools out in the market. Off the record, we're not being recorded. Tools that are way better than TFS at this, but to track their work. And then all of you have seen, I hope, some of these in your offices, these types of boards, right? These are called Kanban boards or Scrum boards. Don't confuse that. If I call this a Kanban board, so at home I have a Kanban board. Doesn't mean I'm doing Kanban. There's a set of rules that apply to Kanban. I just have a board that visualizes my work. Okay? That makes sense? So if somebody says I'm doing Kanban, see I got a board. Ask some questions. You know, I can provide you some questions to ask. Kanban's not, it's one of the rules is visualizing your work. And that's how you do it. What's that?
It's like fantasy football.
The
Draft day.
board. That's the draft board.
That's
Draft
right. So what else do we talk about when we talk about agile teams? We talk about burn downs. These are metrics, right? Burn down. This is how much work that we burn down day over day. We do burn ups. This is a projection type of metric that says, based on how much work a team delivers over time, this is where the trend tells us that we'll finish all of this work by this time. That's what a burn up does. Make sense? A burn down is what a sprint, day-to-day, what's remaining. Burn up is over time, here's how much work we've accumulated, and if we were to say we want to be done by sprint 20, here's where we fit based on that trend. Velocity, burn down, burn ups, velocity, oh my. Some terms, other terms you might hear, features, epics. There's a debate. I think Aaron and I debate on this often. What's broader, feature, or epic? I don't get too hung up around it, but
I do.
Aaron does. So I let it win.
Yep.
It's easier. Then we come down to stories. So those stories, and then those stories, what are the tasks that make up those stories? So that's kind of a hierarchy. Features and epic, story to task. We talked about the conflict session, some agreements that teams often make, team agreements. Gave you some examples around that, some team conflict protocol. What else is there? Now, I didn't get a chance, unfortunately, to hit any of this. I apologize.
But I think I categorized a little bit, and so hopefully I wasn't too off, but it sounded like people wanted refreshers on what they learned from the foundations class, to learn about the Scrum process,